As you can see on the board, there's a quote by Voltaire. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire also said, and he only had like on internet 120 quotes, but he also said the more often a stupidity is repeated, the more it gets the appearance of wisdom. He also said, if you want to know who controls you, look at who you are not allowed to criticize. Now, Voltaire was an Englishman. No, I'm sorry, he was a Frenchman. And he was a writer, a historian, a philosopher, and he was famous for his wit and his criticism of the Catholic Church. He was 16th century, said some profound things. And I've never been accused of being a wit, maybe a dim-wit, but not a wit. So I don't know exactly what a wit is, but I got one over here. So today we're going to use some of Voltaire's wit. Where did absurd start? When did it start? Who started it? Well, we can go all the way back to the Bible, to Genesis. And the serpent's talking to Eve. And the serpent suggested that God was worried Adam and Eve would become like, if they were if they ate from the tree, would become like God. Now, Eve shifts from heeding God's will to obeying the devil, the serpent, the father of lies. Why? Adam and Eve knew God as he is. Their minds were not clouded by the falsehoods of half-truths. They would have had experience and knowledge, but they rebelled against that truth. Why? The answer has two parts. It lies in they had choice, and it lies in that there was a lie told. The choice God gave them, the lie that came from the father of lies, the devil, the serpent, as a serpent. As Voltaire said, those who can make you believe absurdities, what is more absurd than the creation believing it can be greater or equal to God, the creator? If those can make you believe such, they can make you commit atrocities. Adam and Eve committed the very first atrocity, and mankind has been repeating it throughout history. Another Old Testament example, and the Bible calls this guy Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter before God. Nimrod established a great kingdom, which included Babel, which was then turned in and fed through history in the Bible as Babylon. It was in the land of Shinar. He later built other cities. Nimrod was obviously a skilled man, and you can read all this in Genesis 10, Genesis 6. And he was an ambitious leader. Besides being the founder of the infamous Babel and many other cities, Nimrod was a mighty man with great physical strength and great strength of will. He was also a giant in stature. Then that would be another reason why people of his time would follow him and why so many legends sprung up about him. Now, remember this, Nimrod was the great grandson of Noah. He came through the lineage of Ham through to Cush, who was his father. As the leader of the kingdom of Babel, Nimrod is also connected with the Tower of Babel. In Genesis 6, according to historian Josephus, Nimrod said he would revenge on God if he should have in mind to drown the world again. For that he would build a tower too high for the waters to reach. Absurd? Of course. Even if he could build a tower that would exceed the height of the water, it would only hold a few people as it got smaller and smaller as it got to the top. Not even half of the people that would build it would survive. Not even a tenth. But you see, Nimrod told the people a lie, an absurdity, and they chose to believe it. Josephus records this in the Antiquities of the Jews, book 1, chapter 4. But God said, I will not destroy the world again with water after the flood. Construction of the Tower of Babel ended when God, as if there were, through his means, they were happy because of what Nimrod was leading them into, he made it impossible for them to communicate effectively enough to finish the construction of the tower. So Nimrod was proved wrong. All men's strength and ability, even the strength of the mightiest men, and Nimrod was considered one of the mighty men. God can choose to revoke that title and that claim. How absurd to believe, rejecting your own eyes, that a man could build a tower to heaven. Even the flood, if the flood did come, it wouldn't work. You see, Nimrod gave the people a lie. They believed the lie, and they did atrocities. How much more atrocity can you do than to disobey a direct order from the Creator? The first man and woman were placed in a garden. That's what it tells us in Genesis. I got to stand still. They were put in a garden, and they were told, do not leave the garden. So they stayed in it until they were thrown out. And then they were told to spread out and multiply. They didn't do it. Cain came along and said, let's build some cities. Let's fortify them. And then Nimrod comes along, and not only did he build the Tower of Babel, he started building cities. Cities that you have heard before, like Nineveh, like Babylon, and many others. What was wrong with that? God told them not to do that. God told them to go and spread out across the earth and multiply and not build cities. Today, the fact remains that large urban areas are not typically conducive to the standard and the lifestyle model by the Creator, and in which he established. The first man and woman were placed in a garden, not in a city. By the way, Jesus was betrayed with a kiss from Judas, whose name meant man of the cities. So you might ask, what's an atrocity? What's the atrocity here? What's going on? How about this? Building of these cities, the atrocity. How does that manifest itself? Well, it manifests itself in crime, in drugs, in disease, in rebellion. And all those things are happening to us. One more Old Testament example. When Joshua was poised to lead God's people into Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, what did he encounter in that land? People worshiping demons masquerading as God. Baal, big B, two A's and an L, was the supreme God they worshiped. Who devised such an absurd lie? There is no name or one person who devised such an idea. But the ideology was carried over from the rebellion of Cain and Nimrod. And the atrocities resulted in the sacrifices of the firstborn babies, ritualistic prostitution, sensuality beyond the most morbid imagination is what they faced. Now, one might say this is all ancient history. We are civilized today. Well, I submit to you, we are a nation, and of the world, we are a mirror image of that ancient history masquerading as civilized. And here's to make my point. In July 28, 1914, Australian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria, was assassinated by a Siberian nationalist named Grevalo Prinzel. In modern days, it was almost as if Voltaire's quote was reversed. Atrocities began to produce absurdities. What happened? Well, what happened was World War I, the Great War. 20 million deaths, 21 million wounded. Over what? Over someone who said, I am the next king of Austria, heir apparent. And somebody in Serbia said, who was under Austria's control at the time, said, I don't like that. You don't need to be king. We don't need a king. Well, what's the Bible say about that? It's interesting. The Bible in 1 Samuel chapter 8 tells us about kings. Now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judge over Israel. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. The people said to Samuel, give us a king to judge us. Verse 6. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all the way they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, and I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they have done since the day I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice. However, you should solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. What is that behavior? So Samuel did this. And here's what he said. This will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots, and he will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his fifties, and will set some to the plow the ground and reap the harvest, and some will make weapons of war and equipment to chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive oils, and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage, and will give it to his officers and servants, and he will take your male and servants and your female servants, your finest young men, your donkeys, and put them to work. He will take a tenth of your sheep, and he will he will be his servants, and you will be his servants, and you will carry out in that day, because your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will hear you in that day. Nevertheless, people refused to obey what Samuel said, and they wanted a king. So he said, okay, I'll give you a king. And that's how kings start. Now, there were kings already, even in Samuel's time, of other people. And that's what the people were saying. They were saying, look, they got kings to lead them. We want kings too. Let us have a king. God said, you don't need a king. You got me. Well, what did they say? In essence, we don't want you. After this started, the war of World War I and all the deaths, 20 million, 21 million wounded, something happened during that war. It started in 1914, ended in 1919. And so why did Austria need a king anyway? Who knows now? But the end of the war was caused by the fact that Germany started torpedoing our commercial vessels going to Europe. And that aroused the young lion from his slumber, and U.S. was the young lion, and they ate him up. But such an atrocity caused by such a dumb thing ended up only killing this many people, but in 20 years, we did it again. World War II, 70 to 85 million people. Now, these figures might seem really high to you, but the point is, in World War I, we killed 20 million people. But what happened is they started recording what the effects of the war was and how many people died from the effects, not just the battles. Now, how did it happen? How did we get from World War II in 20 years to doing it again? 1939, it started. In 45, it was over. But this time, Voltaire's quote is set back in order. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And that's where World War II exposed it. Now, I want to recommend to you a movie to watch. The movie is called Jojo Rabbit. I don't know if any of you seen it, but if you haven't, it's a movie that is has a lot of humor in it, has a lot of sadness in it, kind of mixes it up, but it's about World War II and a little boy. And it's really interesting. Jojo Rabbit has an imaginary friend. He's 10 years old. And this imaginary friend is Adolf Hitler. And Jojo talks to him all the time. Adolf appears to him. You know, imaginary thing kids have. But Jojo, he got his name Rabbit because he wouldn't kill a rabbit. Jojo dressed up just like a Nazi. He was one of the Nazi children. And he lived through this time period that Berlin was being attacked. And he went to the Nazi children camps, and he had a friend. And his friend was, they say it's Orky, but it's spelled with a Y. So it means sound like Yorkie, but his name was Orky. And Orky was a little fat boy that was 11 years old. And Orky was in the troop with Jojo. So they went out to the camp and they had to stay overnight. Laying in a tent at night, and they've been told all these things about Jews. And so Orky says, I don't know that I've ever seen a Jew. What do they look like? And Jojo says, well, I don't know what they look like. He said, but they smell like Brussels sprouts. And Orky says, yeah, that's right. They smell like Brussels sprouts. So that's who we're supposed to kill, right? Right. Now, we laugh at that because it's cute, but the absurdity is exactly what they were telling me. When the movie first comes on, it's got all these black and white films of Germans in these rallies for Hitler. And the music to the black and white film rolling is the Beatles singing, I Want to Hold Your Hand. And so it's showing all this and all these, I mean, Hitler was like rock star in Germany. And all these women were running to this, rushing the stage. I'm sure they staged to do that, rushing the stage and becoming crazies for Hitler. And there were thousands and thousands of people in these films. And that's how it started out. But the story is the atrocity of the lie. And when you accept the lie, you repeat the lie, then it becomes the truth. And so that really was what the war was about. Hitler rose to power because Germany wanted a leader. They wanted a Messiah. Even in the movie, Jojo says that Hitler was there to save Germany. So Germany, why did Germany do this? Well, the reason they did it was the Treaty of Versailles after World War I was a treaty that at first Woodrow Wilson was going to be a treaty of peace and similar to what we did after World War II with Germany. It didn't turn out that way. They changed it at Versailles, and it was a very punitive treaty against Germans. Couldn't have any military, had to give up certain lands, had to do this and that. Well, German people, they wanted somebody to lead them away from that. And Hitler was the man. And so Hitler then led them into the Second War. So how are we civilized people doing today? Those two wars didn't show us to be very civilized when you had over 100 million people die. Well, we have a war going on right now in Ukraine, of which we are a proxy to. We have people coming on TV that have told us so many lies that if they told us the truth, we wouldn't recognize it. We are being told such absurd things, it's hard to comprehend all of it. But let's single out one of the more egregious lies and let it lead us to our finale. It's called gender identity. A lobbyist group in Washington on 17th Street has an office building, and this group's name is Human Rights Campaign. In 2014, the group HRC was only a year away from Congress passing a bill named Same-Sex Marriage Bill. At that time, the HRC realized that their whole reason for existence was coming to an end. But with an annual budget of $57 million, they need to rebrand. So they took on lobbying for the transgender movement. Now, this is a move that was planted in history. Remember the tolerance movement when the Christian women's liberation came about to get rid of drinking and intolerance to women voting and those type of things. Well, at the end of, or the culmination of their movement, they dispersed. They never came back again. You don't hear them anymore, but not these guys. They decided they're going to move up, move on to the next thing. They've already won this battle. Let's go to the next battle. Have you ever wondered who is the woke mob? Have you ever asked you this? You know, who is the woke mob? Who are these people that are doing this to us? Who cancels us? Who does this? Well, there's many aspects to woke and woke mob, but this is one that's right up at the top. This HRC is right there at the top of the list. Who do you think funds the group? HRC gets donations from large corporations. In fact, since taking on the transgender movements, HRC's budget in 2021 rose to $65 million annually. And if corporations don't give, they could be canceled, slandered, boycotted, regulated, and slammed into oblivion. Good example, Disney. According to Voltaire's quote, what absurdity are we asked to believe? We are to believe that if you feel or think or desire to be opposite gender from what you were born as, then you should have that right. Is that absurd enough? Now we all know that it's not biologically correct, any of this, but we are asked to pretend to believe something that you know is not true. Or you will be told to shut up, aka canceled, censored, or just go on and repeat the lie. What's the result? Examples, there are several. This is where the lines between absurdity and atrocity seem to converge. Last week, during the Senate confirmation hearings, Supreme Court Justice candidate Ketanji Brown Jackson, a woman, was asked by Senator Marsha, I think it's Washburn, of Tennessee, and she asked this question. She asked Judge Jackson if she could define the word woman. Possibly the dumbest question ever asked a Supreme Court justice in the history of this country. However, it was superseded by the answer that Judge Jackson gave, which was she didn't know. That she said, I'm not a biologist. Somebody quipped on TV and said, well, you know, you might ask Judge Jackson, is it raining? And she would say, I'm not a meteorologist.
Some woman also said she wasn't a veterinarian, but she knew a dog.
That's right, I saw that too. But I know what a dog is. But she was taken off guard so much by the question, she couldn't decide the political ramifications of her answer. So she opted to voice something absurd instead of saying something as simple as, I'm an adult female. Woman is defined as an adult female. That could have been it. And then Washburn would have had the dumbest question in the world ever presented to a Supreme Court justice candidate. But it didn't happen that way. This was not only issue Judge Jackson faced. She was confronted with other questions. Questions as to why she had a judicial record of passing sentences of convicted pedophiles of child porn to lesser than recommended sentences. Judge Jackson is an activist judge, not a constitutionalist. Make what you may of this, but you will soon find your answer, as Judge Jackson will be sent to the full Senate Monday and will be our next Supreme Court justice. Absurd. On March the 17th, 2022, Leah Thomas won the NCAA Women's 500-meter swimming championship. Emma Wyant came in second. However, House Republicans introduced a resolution declaring Emma the winner. The governor of Florida declared Emma, who is from Sarasota, the real winner. Now, you're very aware of the absurdity of here. Leah Thomas is a male. So, not to be outdone by the Florida governor, President Biden announced that he would be rewriting Title IX to include transgender. Any sane person knows that this is a one-way street. No female athlete could trans and compete against male athletes. Their bodies aren't made that way. What's the atrocity being the result of this absurdity? Well, the HRC, having to rebrand, found that they could continuous woke control of the gender identity platform by adding letters to the gay rights movement, like LGBTQT and on, because there's a plus at the end of it now. We'll get to that. Plus means they will pursue woke mob until the truth of God stops them, just like God did with Nimrod. But for now, the mob marches on. Again, in Florida, House Bill 1557, Parental Rights in Education bill, was passed to stop the woke education machine from teaching kindergartners and up regarding sex education and transgenderism. The HRC, through their benefactor, Disney, to attack the bill, and as normal procedure, they created a narrative by lying. They told a lie. Don't say gay in the classroom. That's what they said the bill was about. Turns out the lie was repeated across the media outlets, and soon it was chanted nationwide, even though the word gay was not in the wording of the bill at all. Voltaire was right. The more often a stupidity is repeated, the more it gets the appearance of wisdom. Voltaire's atrocities committed here are many. This is what's happening from this. Did you know that St. Louis Children's Hospital is promoting puberty blockers, also called hormone blockers, to help delay unwanted physical changes that don't match the desire of a 10-year-old or 11-year-old who wants to become trans? None of this is FDA approved. The long-term effects on children is unknown. A trans man is promoted to admiral in the Navy as the first woman to achieve rank. The pronouns he and she or him and her is being eliminated in our schools and our government. A Supreme Court justice doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman. A tech company can cancel your First Amendment right by canceling the right to be heard. Children being taught sex in kindergarten when they can't even spell transgender, pangender, puberty, and we tolerate this as a freedom. It is actually child abuse. Jesus said He is the truth and the light. And we have trampled both of them. In John 18, it says, Pilate said to Jesus, what is truth? His question was to Jesus, are you a king? And Jesus answered, you say rightly, I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into this world, that I should bear witness to the truth. And everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Eve was not God. Nimrod was not God. Hitler was not God. HRC is not God. LBGTTTQQ1AA+ is not God. Everyone who is of the truth, and the truth is God. The only truth that can set you free. Voltaire's quote is honest reflection of us today. We're afraid. They put fear that we are not going to stand up for the truth. And we're not getting the truth. And we're not getting it in places where we should be getting it. Voltaire's right. Those who can make you believe absurdities. A man is a woman and a woman is a man. Can make you commit atrocities, abusing children.